Your 3D printer can print way more functional, useful 3D prints than you probably realize. And in this video, I'm going to share a whole bunch of 3D print ideas. So you've got a 3D printer, and if you're like me, the first thing you ask yourself is, okay, what should I print now? For sure, you'll go through your printer upgrades phase, printing out at least a kilo of tchotchkes and trinkets that may or may not actually improve your 3D printer or your 3D printing workflow. But then what? Well, then you'll probably go through your trendy prints phase where you'll print the same silly stuff we've all printed before. Articulated octopuses, fidget toys, benchies, and on and on. Guilty as charged. But eventually, one of two things will happen. Either you'll get sick of printing stuff that doesn't actually have a purpose, or, like me, your significant other will get sick of a bunch of useless plastic crap kicking around your house. What to do? Well, fortunately, in this video, I'm going to share with you some of my absolute favorite, most useful 3D prints. Yes, actual functional 3D prints that solve real problems for you and your family. And stick around to the end because I think you'll be very surprised at some of the things that you can actually print. Trash cans. What's more useful than trash, right? Well, let's start the list off with probably the prints that I use the most. Trash cans. Yes, trash cans. I don't know why, but where I live, a decent looking, stylish trash can can cost as much as $75 plus shipping, which I guess is fine, but all the decent looking ones are also incredibly small, like 3 or 5 liters max. And I don't know about you, but I hate emptying the trash cans twice a week, and with things like failed prints or, more honestly, lightly soiled diapers, small trash cans just don't work in my house. Fortunately, thanks to this clever design by Gazaldra on Colt 3D, this was no longer an issue. Don't get me wrong, the trash can itself is hideous, but the lid is nice. So all I did was take the lid that Gazaldra created and pair it with my very own design for the actual bin, throw in a Boolean modifier to pair the two together, a simple ring in the middle to reinforce the sides, and voila! You have the most romantic gift a person can give to their special someone. Now, in case you're wondering about size, yes, if you want to go big, then you're going to need a bigger format 3D printer like my Creality CR10 V3 or the Anycubic Cobra Max. But to be completely honest, I printed the maximum size I could on the CR10 for my office trash can, and it actually turned out to be way too big. Some quick math and flashbacks to the trauma of high school geometry tell me that on the Prusa MK3S Plus with its 21 centimeter print height, you actually could print a short and chunky trash can with approximately 7 liters of volume, which is twice that of most of the trash cans that I found online. Or you could print the design as is. I will publish the link in the description, and you would still end up with a 4-liter trash can that prints in around 3.5 hours on vase mode, plus however long it takes to print the optional lid. Oh, and by the way, on the topic of trash cans, I just had to throw this in because I love it. When we designed our kitchen, the carpenters told us that Bloom, the company that makes the drawers, only offered those square trash cans in a few dimensions, and that unfortunately, this meant that we were going to have a big empty space in between our trash cans and no room for a third bin for compost. F that noise. I whipped up Blender, mostly because I didn't know about Onshape yet, and I designed a hanging compost bin that not only fits in between the two bins, but it also closes to keep the stench of decaying plant matter. And as a bonus, it helps hold down the trash bag holders, which for some reason love to float up and get stuck every single time we tried to open the drawer. So all in all, a really, really cool solution. And honestly, tell me you've seen a cooler solution for storing compost in the house. I'll wait. Shelf supports. When designing my custom-made studio / guest room / workshop / shrine to 3D printing in Bitcoin, I wanted some shelves that stood out and which had a more masculine design than many of the readily available shelf supports out there at the hardware store. Fortunately, I found these awesome shelf brackets by Chondrotoma on Thingiverse, which allowed me to combine black and gold in a beautiful and unique way. And to be honest, the interior designer was really not a fan, but I like them a lot, and it's my money. And don't worry if you're not a fan either, there are actually hundreds of models on printables and Thingiverse to choose from, many of which are optimized for strength and will actually tell you approximately how much weight they're designed to hold. Signage. Another cool way to make use of your 3D printer is by making signs. I'll be honest with you, I actually own one of those overpriced Cricut vinyl machines, and so making vinyl signs and stuff is really easy for me, and yet I still really prefer making signs and stuff with 3D printing, so the Cricut machine is just in a drawer somewhere collecting dust. The end result is just so much more impressive and polished than sticking a vinyl sticker on something, though I guess you could print out the signboard itself and then put vinyl on it. I've custom designed signs warning would-be intruders to stay out of our yard, nifty promotional business card holders for my company's trade show booths, signs to subtly but effectively guilt you into subscribing to my YouTube channel if you want to enjoy more free content like this, hint, hint, and even handy little Wi-Fi QR code signs so I don't have to give people the Wi-Fi password every time someone comes over. You can use the instructions and files for this one from Radio Jack on printables, though I found that you can actually just put in your Wi-Fi information on a site called QR Code to STL, and it will generate STLs with the right QR code for you. You can even put an indentation on the back for an NFC chip so people don't have to take out their phone, go into the camera app, and scan a QR code like freaking cavemen. The sky is the limit as to what kind of signs you can create, but just remember for anything that's going to go outside, use either ASA filament or at least PETG for their superior UV resistance. Phone cases. Let's take a break from the around the house stuff for just a minute and talk about phone cases. Have you ever actually stopped to consider just how ridiculous it is to pay $49 for a simple piece of silicone to cover your phone? That's like 2 or 3 rolls of filament, and quite frankly, the basic cases are, well, basic. Instead, you can actually print your own phone cases in TPU, PETG, or even PLA, and while you probably would think that they'll turn out super janky looking, with just a little bit of tweaking, tuning, and cleanup work, they can actually look really, really nice. I like to print them with 0 top and bottom layers and actually use different patterns of infill in my slicer to create a unique effect that nobody else has. This is especially cool because oftentimes you get a new phone and the only options available for the first month or two are the insanely overpriced ones from either the authorized manufacturers or the OEM. Oh, and one other cool benefit of printing your own is that you can customize them for your own needs. My phone, for example, wouldn't charge wirelessly if I had the thickness of a case and then my pop socket on top of it. So I just cut out a hole in my slicer using a negative volume modifier, stuck the pop socket directly to the phone, and lo and behold, the pop socket not only sticks better to the phone itself, but wireless charging finally works without having to remove the entire case every single night. Custom cable channels. Here's a cool one that I know you're gonna love. You know how we all have all these little cables, pipes, and other annoying and ugly stuff just sitting around the walls on our house? Well, it's time to hide your shame. Sure, you can buy these cable channels at a hardware store for the same purposes, such as straight lines on white walls, but if you want to have a more challenging scenario covered, like a drainage hose that curves or a water pipe that bends at a 90-degree angle in a highly visible place, then this is where 3D printing can come to the rescue. Plus, unlike those plain, ugly store-bought ones, you can choose from a bajillion different color filaments out there to get the one that blends in most with your wall, tiles, or background. Now, this was another one of the fastest and simplest things to design, but it is another one of the coolest ones. Hardware. All right, let's now talk about hardware. One of my favorite things about 3D printing is that it helps ameliorate, whoa, you like that SAT word there? My insane levels of impatience. Where I live, hardware stores close early on Friday and don't open up again till Sunday, which is the start of our work week. And this inevitably means that every time I'm milling around the house on a Saturday looking for fun DIY projects, I will discover something that I need that is not available when I need it. This has run the gamut from all different kinds of screw anchors for various size bolts and material types to flexible washers or rubber seals to fix various leaky pipes or kitchen stuff like my favorite water bottles, and even the occasional nuts or bolts if I'm in a pinch and don't need something particularly strong. You'd honestly be really surprised how many different types of brackets, mounts, and miscellaneous hardware that you can actually 3D print. And while I'm not going to advocate something like using 3D printed bearings instead of actual real ones, you can definitely get by 3D printing some of the stuff that would normally take a trip to the hardware store. Here's a fun example actually, just to give you an idea of the possibilities. When I was building the fence for my backyard, I needed spacers to go between the planks. Now, the magnetic ones that are recommended by the manufacturer of the fence rails were not only twice as thick as I wanted for privacy, but they also cost about 80 cents each. And considering I needed around 2,500 of them, that was going to be a really serious expense, like the cost of an entire 3D printer. So instead, I bought a few rolls of durable ASA filament and I printed them at home, saving myself nearly $2,000 in the process. Tools. Oh man, I could literally do an entire separate video on all the tools and tool accessories that I've 3D printed and how many hundreds of dollars I've saved by doing it. From clamps to jigs to clamping jigs, measuring tools, tools to measure my tools, and much, much more. But none of those are likely to earn you brownie points with the old SO, so let's do this. If you'd like to see me do an entire separate video all about 3D printed tools, then drop me a comment below and let me know. Tripods and articulating arms. Here's the scenario. You've got stuff. You want that stuff to stand in a certain way in a certain place. This could be mounting your phone or iPad somewhere, mounting a light in your work area or filming background, sticking a camera on your dashboard, your desk, your printer, or whatever. Once again, you can print most of this type of stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I did not get along with Sneak's popular Raspberry Pi articulating arm system I printed. Too complicated, too many directions of rotation, and the 3D printed bolts couldn't withstand the torsion of constant and regular adjustments. But there are, however, plenty of other designs, such as this sturdier boom arm type design by Hamkers that can be scaled up to fit your needs. I also really enjoy this 3D printed tripod that I made to hold one of my lights, and it's actually a lot better than the mini tripods that came with some of my lights. With a little creativity here, the sky is the limit, and this definitely isn't limited just to my fellow video creators. You could create tripods to prop up accent lights in your home, articulating arms to hold things like magnifying glasses or workpieces, and so much more. Lights and light housings. While we're on the topic of lighting, let's talk about lights and light housings. Now, personally, I haven't taken the plunge to print out an entire 3D printed light housing just yet. But that doesn't mean that I haven't dabbled in a lot of 3D printed light solutions. I have 3D printed deflectors for the lights in my studio, custom designed light housings to hide LED strip lights, a heat-resistant set of brackets to hold high-powered LED panels I took out of some outdoor lights and repurposed for my printer cabinet, diffusers for some of the ugly kitchen light bulbs that stood out too much, and even a replacement diffuser for one of the light fixtures in my house that got broken because someone wasn't gentle enough when installing it. I've even rescued some of my overpriced Philips Hue bulbs that I dropped during installation from the trash can by printing out new diffusers for them. 3D printing for lighting purposes is a lot of fun, and it's a great way to showcase the possibilities of 3D printing as a whole. Just make sure that you print with PETG, preferably the natural color, so that you get that diffusion effect without blocking out too much of the light. Heavy-duty mechanical tools. Some of you have probably seen my previous video on the camera jib I made, and if you haven't, then make sure to check it out. This project definitely expanded my understanding of what is possible with 3D printing and really got me thinking, what other highly mechanical functional prints could I 3D print? I think a lot of times we write off additive manufacturing as not being strong enough, precise enough, or polished enough to really create these types of things. But if that project proved anything, and I think it did because I'm using the jib right now, it proved that that simply isn't true. I'm always looking for ideas for functional and mechanical prints to level up my skills and solve everyday problems around the house. So if you have some heavy duty or mechanical prints that you'd love to share or recommend, please drop them in the comments below. I would love to print them as well. Planters, big planters. All right, I'm going to assume that you've already seen some of the 3D printed planters, especially because Printables did a really big competition recently to showcase some of the best designs. But what always blows my mind is that people don't take this idea to the logical extreme like I have. Sure, tiny little planter pots for your succulents on your desk and all that is cool and all, but like I mentioned before, even a standard Prusa MK3S Plus can print a 7-liter volume cylinder. Some of these designs turned out much nicer than others, to be honest, but for the style of my home, I've actually found that the most success comes from just whipping up really simple designs of my own in either Blender or Onshape. Here again, what's cool about this is really the ability to play with different styles and materials and colors to exactly match the floor, the table, a piece of furniture, and so on. One tip on printing planters from my experience, there's really no need to waste tons of filament by printing these thick sides and mimicking what a certain planter would look like if it were made out of ceramic. I've actually had tons of success simply printing in vase mode with a little reinforcement ring somewhere inside. Sure, I suppose I could run into trouble when the roots of the plants grow and expand, but for now, even tightly packed soil and regular watering haven't phased any of my planters. Furniture modifications and upgrades. When I was designing this workspace, I wanted a custom-made shelf to lift my laptop off of the table so that it would be at eye level whether I was working standing or sitting down. And because I also love to do maker projects, clean 3D prints, and assemble parts at my workstation, I wanted to get as much light as possible in from the sides of this shelf and have as much room as possible for shoving my keyboard, trackpad, and other junk out of the way so that I can tinker. Now, I went about designing some cool stands to hold this shelf. I made them out of plastic rather than wood so that I could create tons of holes for light to pass through. And I then reached out to a local company for a quote, printing them on a large format 3D printer, and they quoted me about $500 for the set. So for $549 at the time, I picked up the CR10V3 and I printed those bad boys myself. Now, while they didn't come out perfect, I hadn't mastered the large format bed and had a ton of difficulty with warping. The end result is really cool, and it's also lighter weight than a wooden counterpart would have been, meaning that I can easily lift the entire thing off my desk if I need more extra room to work. Now, this is just one idea for how you can level up your furniture. You could also modify your existing furniture like I did with my IKEA chair to help it slide under my desk. You could print some custom designed, nearly invisible TPU socks for your couch or bed to protect your floors. And of course, you can create some really nice mounting solutions for wires and electronic components to hide those wires. Hide that shame, people. The sky is the limit, and all you have to do is look around your house at your furniture and ask, honestly, what is wrong with you? Drawers. One of the things I love about 3D printing is that I can create things that either don't exist or simply cannot be found where I live. This includes literally hundreds, maybe thousands of different designs for various types of small drawers to suit every need, from under-desk drawers to standalone drawer systems, modular drawer systems, and of course, gridfinity drawers. shout out to my Gridfinity peeps. As I mentioned before, I was kind of frustrated with the possibilities of the off-the-shelf drawer manufacturer, Bloom, and also I didn't want to deal with the weight of heavy metal brackets and wooden drawers because honestly, the heat of my laptop is already starting to bow the shelf on my desk. Fortunately, I discovered these simple drawers from a Vice on printables and then remixed them to max out the bed of my CR10, yielding me 3 simple drawers for miscellaneous stuff I might need on my desk. As you can see, I had a failed print that I decided to try and salvage, and honestly, printing them with 0 top and bottom layers to save filament was probably not the best idea for strength, but they continue to serve me well. Though I will say that lately, I have been tempted to add in some Gridfinity organization to these otherwise super disorganized drawers. Which brings me to entire organization systems and structures. Yes, of course, you already know that 3D printing can be used to organize stuff. Honestly, that's probably the number 3 category of things people print after printer upgrades and useless tchotchkes. But did you know that you can actually print entire organization systems? For those of you who've seen my previous video on Zach Friedman's open source Gridfinity system, this won't come as any surprise to you whatsoever. And those of you who haven't, well, go watch that video right here. But I just want to point out that while Gridfinity is awesome, it's really not for everything. It wouldn't make sense, for example, to print actual modular bins for bigger things like kitchen utensils or cable organization, which is why I wanted to point out that there are, in fact, other completely different systems out there for your organizational delight. Personally, I really enjoyed putting together this electronics organization drawer using this system by WBU42. It includes all sorts of different angles, lengths, connectors, overhangs, and pretty much everything that you could ever need to create your own custom organization system with a minimum of plastic wasted on things like bottoms. To be honest, this one took me a long time and a lot of filament, but when I compare it to how I used to organize my electronics in one-size-fits-all IKEA bins, it's so much better. I did try, by the way, to organize my kitchen stuff with this same system, but I ended up getting really frustrated and just ended up with a bin full of spare parts that maybe I might possibly one day use to organize some other unsuspecting drawer. Oh, and 3D printing isn't just for organizing small, lightweight stuff either. I'm sure many of you have seen Repcor's open source RepRack system for storing your filament on the wall. Now, personally, I don't really have enough room for my walls to store all of my rolls of filament, but it's a really cool idea and one that I'd love to use if I had more space. So there you have it, my long list of unexpected, useful 3D prints. I'd love to hear in the comments below, what's one thing that I shared in this video that you never thought about printing before? And while you're at it, I'd love to remind you to please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. This is a brand new channel trying to make our way in a very crowded and competitive landscape. And as of right now, literally 99% of you are not yet subscribed to this channel, much less have notifications turned on. As always, I hope you've really enjoyed this video, and I look forward to making many, many more videos just like it in the near future. Until then, I wish you nothing but successful prints. Amen.